October 28, 2021. Welcome to the Meaningful Ideas Trading Club. We are excited to get going today. We've got C. Gordon Moose on. I'm going to call him Moose throughout the program. He told me that would be okay. And so we've got a lot to go over today. We've got 13 principles from Think and Grow Rich, famous book by Napoleon Hill. We're going to introduce that a little bit and talk about what that is. Welcome today, C. Gordon Moose. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Kyle. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Those of you not on the or on the call, not familiar with Moose, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what your background is?
My name's Carl Gordon Moose. I go by Moose because I've got a built-in nickname, so feel free to call me Moose. That's totally fine. Everybody does. I'm a commercial real estate guy. I played hockey all my life. Went to college up in upstate New York. Played there. Got out of college, started selling equipment, then got into the mortgage business. Then I saw other people buying property. So I started buying property myself, got into the multifamily space. We owned about 22 buildings at one point. And then, that went through its paces, retired for a little while. I've got an ex-wife and 3 teenage kids. But all along, I've been a student of Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich. And I've had the benefit of working with people like Bob Proctor, Sharon Lechter, who was Robert Kiyosaki's partner in Rich Dad Poor Dad, and a number of the other foundation members. And now I'm a member of the foundation and a certified trainer for the Think and Grow Rich technology, or philosophy, I should say.
So can you give us just a brief overview, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich? What is that for those of you not familiar with Think and Grow Rich? Just tell us a little bit about that. And then I want to get into what the principles are that you really teach. We'll run through those and then go back and kind of really dive into those. Okay.
For those of you that don't know, Think and Grow Rich was originally, it was a work done by Napoleon Hill back in the early 1900s. Napoleon Hill came from poverty, grew up in Virginia, and he wanted to become a lawyer. And so to put himself through law school, he was writing for a magazine, and the editor of the magazine said, I want you to interview wealthy, successful people and write a monthly article. Well, his first subject was Andrew Carnegie. And at the time, Andrew Carnegie was, I think, 65 or 66 years old. And for those of you that don't know who Andrew Carnegie was, he came from Scotland with nothing and became one of the wealthiest men in North America, him and John D. Rockefeller. Andrew Carnegie consolidated all the steel in the late 1800s, and he formed U.S. Steel, which was the biggest corporation in the world at the time. And when he sold it to J.P. Morgan for $450 million, he, in today's money, would be worth about 5 times what Bezos is worth. So he was incredibly wealthy. Mm-hmm. And he was the first subject that Napoleon Hill interviewed. An hour-long interview turned into a 3-day event. And at the end of that, the way the story goes is Andrew Carnegie said, I will give you a letter of introduction to anybody you like, because he could do that. And I want you to interview them and write a book for the common man of what the laws of success are. So he took the next 20 years. The only compensation Napoleon Hill got was reimbursement of expenses by Andrew Carnegie. He wasn't paid. And he wrote what was called the 16 Laws of Success. Now, most people aren't familiar with that. It's actually 1,000 pages, and you can find copies of that. But it was called the 16 Laws of Success. And the editor, when he came to the editor said, well, no one's going to read 1,000 pages. You've got to pare this down. So he took the next 8 years and he edited it down to about 170 pages, which was the first edition of Think and Grow Rich, published in 1938. The first run was 5,000 copies. They sold out in about 2 weeks. They made another run of 5,000 copies, sold that out. The next run was 15,000, and they sold that out. Within 90 days, they had sold 25,000 copies of this book. And, I want to make one more point that a lot of people get confused about. This book is about true wealth, not only about financial riches, but also about true wealth in all areas of your life. And not a single one of the chapters has the word money in it. It's really about changing the way you're thinking from scarcity and a poor mindset to abundance and a wealth mindset. So
what things are we learning in Think and Grow Rich, Moose? Tell us what they are. What are the principles?
Yeah, so let's go through the chapters real quickly, and that will help. The first chapter is called Desire, right? And he says it's the starting point of all achievement. If you don't know what you want and you don't know where you're going, how in the world are you ever going to get there, right? So that's the first chapter. The second chapter, or the second principle, and I may not get these in exact order, but roughly, yeah. The second one is faith. Right. And he says that's the head chemist of the mind. Right. When you mix faith with desire, and all the other principles, then all of a sudden things start to happen, right? And not faith from the religious standpoint, but faith from the belief in the visualization of something that hasn't materialized yet. That's what he's talking about, right? The next one is autosuggestion, and that's the medium by which to influence the subconscious mind. What do we tell ourselves all day long, right? What's that self-talk, right? Is it negative self-talk or is it positive self-talk? And when people do the course, I actually do a course, 13 weeks. We take each principle each week and we go through that. When we get to this chapter, we do this chapter, autosuggestion and subconscious mind, together, because they're the two shortest chapters and they do go together. And one of the exercises is I have people log and journal their thoughts, right? They're dominating thoughts. Like, are your thoughts negative? What are you telling yourself? Are you telling yourself, I'm good enough, I'm strong enough, I'm a good husband, I'm a good partner, I'm a good lawyer or a good businessman or whatever it may be? Or are you telling yourself that you're not good enough, that you didn't come from the right family, that you don't have enough money, right? You don't have the right education. So people log those ideas and thoughts because that's your self-talk, and that's one of the principles, right? The next chapter is called organized planning. This is the longest chapter and probably the driest of the chapters. It has a lot of exercises in there. The next principle is imagination. And Napoleon Hill says this is the workshop of the mind, right? This is the workshop of the mind. And there's nothing in this universe we cannot imagine. And there's nothing we imagine that's not possible in the universe. Now, that doesn't mean it's probable, but it's possible. And the reason that is because we're part of the universe, right? Kyle, you and I are both part of the universe. And if our imagination is part of us, then therefore it's part of the universe. So anything you can come up with in your imagination is possible in the universe. And the next principle is specialized knowledge. And this talks about general knowledge, primal knowledge, and specialized knowledge, how you're going to need, or you're going to require specialized knowledge to succeed. However, you don't have to be the person that came up with the knowledge. If there's something that's required for you to succeed and you don't have that knowledge, go out and find the person or the people that have it. And he talks about how to do that. So that's a very important chapter as well, specialized knowledge. Then we get into persistence, right? Persistence is to a man's character what carbon is to steel. That's what Andrew Carnegie said. Persistence is the sustained effort required to transform faith into desire. The next chapter is one of my favorites, decision. It tells us how powerful people make decisions. And there's actually a formula for that. They acquire enough knowledge to make that decision. No more, no less, right? Number two is they make the decision, right? Based on their desire. So it's a desired-based decision. The third thing is they get into action immediately, no matter what resources they have or don't have, they get into action immediately. And number four is they never look back. In other words, they never second guess themselves. The next chapter is called the transmutation of energy. It talks about your personal image, your self-image. It talks about your energy. And I know you want to talk about that with Proctor because he's a big energy guy, as we all are. But that chapter talks about our energy and our image. The next chapter is called The Power of the Mastermind. And Napoleon Hill said the mastermind is the driving force, right? Connecting yourself with like-minded people that are working harmoniously towards a common goal. That is the definition of a mastermind.
It is exactly right. Mastermind, yeah, it's you hear it too much. It's like diluted these days, but a true mastermind is exactly what you say. You have to butt heads together and it's got to be a close-knit group too.
The next couple chapters are the brain, and it's incredible how accurate he was back in the early 1900s about how the brain works. And the reason that is because he interviewed all these highly intelligent people that gave him little tidbits about how the brain works. And he was actually talking about neuroscience before neuroscience was even a word. And a lot of what he talked about in the book has now been proven with modern science. And then the next chapter is the subconscious mind. And we talked about that. The subconscious mind, he calls it the connecting link. It's what connects us all. And I firmly believe that. Have you ever walked into a room and you've got a vibe from the room, right? That's our subconscious mind picking up the vibe, right? Or he talks about the language, the true language of the universe is emotion, right? If you've ever seen the Mona Lisa, that painting was painted 500 or 600 years ago. But when you look at that picture, that painting, you can sense the emotion of Da Vinci, who painted it, and whoever the subject was, the woman, because that's a universal language, right? Or, you don't have to speak English or Japanese to understand somebody because you can understand them on an intuitive level, right? On that subconscious mind. So that's the chapter. The next chapter, which is the last chapter, is he calls it the sixth sense, right? And he says that is the keys to the kingdom of wisdom. And it's really about our intuition, right? It's about our intuition. And for those of you that are Bob Proctor people, Bob talks about our six mental muscles, right? Our intuition is one of them, right? And that's our intuition, following your intuition, really getting in touch with your intuition and understanding how powerful that is and how it connects us universally. And he talks about that in that particular chapter. And then depending which version you have, there's one last chapter. It's called Outwitting the Six Ghosts of Fear. And he talks about fear, which is what I just finished writing a book. It's called Unstoppable You. And the first chapter is fear, because I believe out of my study with this book, what stops you, Kyle, and me, and all of us are five basic things: fear, doubt,
And worry.
confusion, indecision, and worry. Napoleon Hill points out the human fears. And these are fears that we all have. Don't always manifest the same in all of us, but they're there. And, courage, which someone mentioned Earl Nightingale earlier, Earl Nightingale defined courage as acting in face of your fears. And here's the kicker: you can't be courageous if you don't recognize and are aware of your fears. You can't be courageous without fear. So the first step of being courageous is being aware of your fears. And my goal in the next year and a half is to have a direct impact on 1 million people and have 1 million people understand this material so that they can. And I believe that when they do, the world will change. We'll stop preying on each other. We'll take responsibility for ourselves, and we'll start working together.
I think one thing we can say is, some of these things are common sense, not commonly practiced, right? Would you agree with that?
100%.
So some of what we're talking about here is, and again, you're the focus guy, right? Like the key word is really focus is what you want people to do, whether it's carving out time to think, carving out time to imagine, any one of these principles, right? Getting better at them, right? Because we tend to be more and more a reactionary, society, people that, the more you practice it, your decision-making will become much better, quicker, more efficient, because you're used to doing it, right? Instead of being indecisive, for example, being better organized. I want to talk about these frequencies, okay, that Bob Proctor talks about. You talk about it, because I thought that that's really interesting to understand this.
The highest level of thought, energy, is that spiritual level, right? That's the highest frequency that humans can achieve. And that is on our spiritual level, because you've heard Bob say it. We are not physical beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience. Energy is, right? It's part of us, right? And on that spiritual level, that's the highest level of our thinking. Intellectually, we all think intellectually based on our experience, based on our training, right? You can think about all kinds of things on an intellectual level. And chances are, Kyle, what you think about intellectually, what I think about, are probably different. If I need an attorney, I'm not an attorney. I'm going to call somebody that intellectually knows more than I do about the law. I mean, that just makes sense, right? And then there's the physical plane. Our physical plane is the lowest level of energy, right? It's the lowest level of vibration, right? Anything in the physical world has been diluted down to the lowest level of its existence, right? From the plants to the phone that we use to pencil, whatever. It's something on the physical plane.
How does it help us to know anything about these frequencies? Physical, intellectual, how do we apply it?
Sure. So what is the easiest one of those to change? Your physical vibration, your intellectual vibration, or your spiritual vibration? It's your spiritual.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Spiritual.
Your spiritual, right? And your negative and positive, love versus hate, right? If you find yourself in a hateful or cynical situation, you can switch it like that. So being aware of that, you can immediately alter your emotional state, because it is a state of mind. And when you're in control of your mind and you understand your mind and you're aware of that, you can control and direct it.
Yeah, the spiritual is really the positive, the imagination. Intellectual is actually doing it. Physical is the outcome or the result.
Exactly. Knowing is great, but it's that knowing and doing gap, right? It's the law of attraction. I was actually with Bob when he filmed his portion of the law of attraction. I said after I saw the movie, I said, Bob, something was missing. He goes, yeah, we kind of missed it. He said, what we missed was the law of action. The law of action, the law of attraction, the law of action go together. And he said, the law of attraction is the universe working on you. The law of action is you working on the universe. Anybody that's interested in any of the stuff that I'm doing, please reach out to me. You can reach me at carl@yourfocusguy.com.